Hello and welcome to the Martial Arts Teaching Tactics Podcast. I'm Chris Kent, and I'm joining Chris Bean. Mr. Bean?
Hello, sir.
Today we're going to be talking about increasing retention through connections. So one way we're talking about getting your students to feel excited about your class that will help them in their learning ability. This is because if they are genuinely interested in what you are teaching, they'll be more apt to retain that information. I'm sure you've been excited about something. You've done research, you've listened to podcasts, watched reviews, or maybe even videos on a certain topic. All of this because you wanted to, not because you had to. That is the key difference. Because you're interested in that specific topic, you took the time to learn as much as you could about that thing. This is what we need for our students. If we can get them excited about what they are doing in class, they will want to come back. They will want to go out of their way to practice the new information that they're learning in their class. So, Mr. Bean, what are a few ways that we can achieve this for our students?
Yeah, so of course we want to make connections in class, right? Both with the students, have that personal connection with them, but we also want to have the students make connections with the movements that they're doing, right? And that really is the key. That's what we're going to be discussing a lot today. If you are consistently running the same type of drills in class, but you're not telling the students why they're doing these, what impact those drills have on them as a student, how that associates with what they're going to be doing at belt testing, or if this is even something they're going to test on, that is where the disconnect can kind of happen. So we want to make sure that we're doing drills that are directly incorporated or directly a part of what the students are going to test on, and then we let them know that. Right? Hey, listen, this is why this is important. We're doing this drill to work on this specific thing so that when you get to belt testing, you can do that specific thing, whatever it is, very well or better or the correct way or whatever the focus of that specific drill is. Now, if you don't have the reasons behind you're just doing drills just to do them, you're filling time in class, that's where the disconnect can happen. The students show up, they do the stuff, but they don't know necessarily how that affects them. What does this even mean to me? How do I use this? Why are we doing this, right? That's what we want to try to guard against, right? So making sure that you are letting the students know, hey, listen, this is the purpose behind this drill. Give them a focus, give them something to think about as you're doing or going through those motions. You want to let them know how it directly connects to them and to what they're going to be tested on or what they're doing. Coming up with drills that are relevant to the students also is important, right? You want to make these relative to what they're doing. You can't do necessarily a white belt drill at black belt level because that's going to be super basic for them. Nor can you do a black belt drill at white belt level because that's going to be too difficult. So make it relative to what belt rank they are and to the information that they're learning for that specific cycle. The students need to know how that drill directly connects to them and to the information they're learning, and is it something they're going to be tested on later, or is it just for fun? Now, if it is just for fun, that's okay. Just let them know that up front. That way they can go into it with a mindset of, you know what, this is just for fun. I'm just going to do what I can. If I don't get it, at a super high level, that's okay. It's just for fun. I don't have to test on this. Right? They know that up front. They know that going into it. So that's going to put their mind in a different headspace as they go into that. Now, for whatever reason, and we've talked about this previously, we have seemed to find that when we do things just for fun, the students are more apt to remember that information later on, probably because of the headspace that they're in. Hey, listen, we're going to do this just for fun. It's not something you have to do. It's just fun. Let's try it. Let's see what you can do. Right? And then because it's just for fun, they go into it with that mindset, hey, listen, I don't necessarily have to do this. It's just fun. They have that fun kind of tag associated with those movements that they're doing. And then they can think of, when they think of karate, they perhaps think of that fun tag comes up and they think of that movement or those movements or those skills that they worked on for that. Because of this, often is the case that we'll do just for fun things early. And so like maybe we'll do like a red belt drill at green belt, so a lower belt. Like it's just for fun right now, but later on you are actually going to have to know this so that just for fun thing is like a stepping stone. If they remember it, great, awesome. It makes it easier to teach later on. If not, fine, no big. You're going to do it later again anyways. No big deal. But let them know that it's just for fun up front so that it can put them in the right mind space as they're going about and getting ready to do those things. Helping the students feel connected with the information will also be kind of a part of why are you doing those movements, right? How does that specific movement or movements interact with what they're doing? How is that useful to them, right? This will increase their learning rate because it's firmly going to be planted in their brain as a actionable information or an actionable tool that they can use later on. If they get put in a self-defense situation, they know, hey, this thing worked. I can do this. And when they think about movements in that kind of light, then they think, oh, hey, this is a useful thing. I'm going to catalog this in my brain as useful because of this scenario, this situation, or this drill that we did in class that one time. And so then that specific thing becomes actionable, useful information. That will help to make that connection, right? That's what we want to do. We want to build those connections over the movements and the skills and the drills that you're doing in class so they are able to utilize them or think about them as in terms of usefulness or in terms of, hey, this was really fun. I'm excited about this. Or, you know what, in class he said we're going to be doing this next and I'm super pumped to do that. So I'm going to prepare and get ready before I go to class. That way when I show up, I can be better than everybody else, right? Making those connections, right? And really, a big part of that is how useful is this? When can I ever use this move? Why are we doing this move over and over and over again? Give them those tools. Let them know how this works or why this works or what you're doing with this abstract sometimes thing, right? Sometimes you do something that's really abstract and there's no necessarily like, why are we doing this? What's the connection, right? Establish those connections as you're going through your program to help your students be able to recall that information in those situations, right? They can recall, hey, listen, I remember this is why we do this move. Okay, great. Then they can catalog that. That's an actionable tool that they can put into their toolbox. Helping your students develop goals will also help the chances of these connections, right? If you are having a goal of making it to your next belt level, and in class you say, hey, listen, these are the moves you have to do for your next belt level. And this is the standard that I'm going to hold you to on your next belt test. So they're excited to reach their next milestone, that next goal, that next black belt, or the next belt, whatever it is. They're going to go out of their way to try to absorb and retain and work on that information so that when it comes time for them to be at that test or reach that goal, reach that whatever that next milestone is, they put the work in. They put the extra work in. They watched the videos. They took notes on it. They worked on that information at home so that when it comes time to show up for that test or your grading period or whatever it is, they're there. They put the work in. They made that connection because they want to establish and make that next goal for themselves. That will help to get them excited, make those goals and make them visible and easy to see and you know, that goal is right there. Listen, your belt test is in 2 weeks. Listen, these are the things you have to do in 2 weeks for your test, right? So I need you guys to go home and work on this stuff. That way when you show up to your test, you're prepared and ready to perform these things, right? That will get them excited and make those connections so they can help to retain and refresh and work on that information that you're doing in your classes and that you give them for homework. Keeping the students interested, again, we talked a little bit about practical use cases. We want to keep their interest, right? You've probably done low block in your class, and I'm guessing low block is a pretty standard use case, right? Low block is essentially the first block that we do, and lots of places is the first block that anybody does, the low block. You do low block every class, right? I mean, how many times have you done low block? Countless times, right? Taught low block countless times. We do low block every class, or at least once a week, if not multiple times a week, as we're doing class or as the students are doing class. Low block comes up all the time. This is one of those things that kind of is an abstract, right? What are you doing with that? Well, you could say you're blocking a low kick. I would challenge you to think a little bit further outside the box if that's your explanation of your use case for a low block. Maybe at one level, like white belt level, your first introduction to low block. Hey, what are you doing with this? All right, well, we're going to block this low kick. Okay, fine. Acceptable for that. But As you progress, it's going to be important to help to continue that connection, right? Grow that. Yes, you're blocking a low kick. That is something you could do with a low block, although it's probably not the safest or the wisest or the most apt choice to make for blocking a low kick. It could happen, yes. But again, I challenge you to think outside the box a little bit about how you can use that type of technique differently. And do those things with your students in class, right? Work on some drills where they're using these blocks in ways that they're not normally thinking about those blocks. If you have applications for your forms, use those. That's a beautiful, beautiful system for you, right? Come up with applications for your forms. Those patterns, those katas, those techniques that you do all the times, monotonous ways and over again, facing different directions and with different focuses throughout, great. They know those things. But have they made those connections? What are they doing in that pattern, right? How are they growing and learning from that, just doing it over and over again? Is that just maintenance, or is there connections to be made still on that information that they've done for years and years? I believe so, right? Having those practical use cases, again, gives your students those actionable tools, the relative important information for why you do movement A or B or X or Y or whatever it is, or even combination. Right? Come up with those combinations that are in your forms, those patterns that you do all the time, and make some practical use cases for those. And then let your students do those, right? Build that into your program.
And making those connections, I think, doesn't only affect their retention or help them remember what's happening, but I do find that also improves the quality of their technique because they're able to think about what's happening when they're doing it. It improves the intensity of the technique because, for example, if I'm just putting my hand out in the low block position as opposed to, blocking that kick or even doing a strike of some sort, when I think about actually striking or actually blocking, it's going to be a little more powerful because I want the extra power behind the technique that I'm doing. So it's a good connection, a good use tool to help them remember what they're doing, but also I find it helps to improve those techniques because they're actually doing something with it. They're not just placing their hand out where it should be or putting it down in the right position, so to speak. They're actually striking or blocking or grabbing or throwing or whatever the application is for that technique. So it works on many levels, not just being able to help them remember, but also I think it improves their techniques too.
Yeah, and speaking of energy output into these moves, if your students are practicing your moves, you're going through your class, and they're putting little to no effort into those moves, then like you said, those connections aren't being made, and perhaps that's because they don't necessarily know what or why they're doing those things. Right? So that's where that information comes in. And as they're putting more emphasis, more energy output into each and every one of those moves, they're going to be thinking about those moves more. It's more intentional movements that they're making. It brings their thought process into why they're doing this move. They're actively thinking about those things. That is the connections that we're talking about, right? As they're going through these moves, we want them to be able to think through, and why are they doing this, and how does it relate to them, and what is a use case for this, right? Make those connections. The more connections you can make for that, the easier it is for them to be able to remember those movements and how and why to do those things. But having a high energy requirement from your students, I believe, will greatly help with that. Because as they're going through those movements, they're more thoughtful. Like I said, they're more thoughtful on putting energy into that, right? And you have to be careful as you do that because you can't overdo it because you might extend too far or land in not the right spot. And so you got to make sure you keep your body in check, which will, again, increase the focus level of those movements or those sequences or drills that you're doing in your class.
And another type of connection we can talk about is just, as you mentioned before, stringing moves together. So, for example, if you have a pattern of moves in a form and they're just doing that one technique on its own, maybe add in the next move in the pattern. So you do a low block and then a middle punch, maybe a high block and a high punch. Well, rather than just practicing low block, low block, low block, low block, okay, now middle punch, middle punch, middle punch. After a certain point in time, connect those moves together. Again, we previously talked about this in chunking down information, but we throw the low block middle punch, and then we do a high block high punch. We practice those 2 sets together: low block middle punch, high block high punch, low block middle punch, high block high punch, and then low block middle punch, high block high punch together in another section. So again, that's a different kind of connection rather than talking about what you're doing or why you're doing it, but then connecting those moves together. It's another useful tool that we've already discussed, but it's important to keep in mind talking about these connections.
And again, that goes back to letting the students know why you're doing those things, right? Hey, we're doing this because of this. We want to grow you in this way. We see that you perhaps could do a little better in this specific area, so we're going to work on this specific area by doing this, right? Let them know those things, right? These moves are going to be important for you because this is your new information that you're going to have to test on at your next belt test, your next grading cycle. This is your new information. Here it is. Make sure you're ready. At least pretend to care and show up and be mindful about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Right? Let the students know this is the stuff, right? You have to test on this. Be ready for it. The more times that you can, of course, the more practice, the more opportunities the students have to go through this information, the more times they have on it, of course, they're eventually going to improve and get better at it. But if they can make the connections, like I'm doing this because of this, or this is the situation I would do this low block in, then you give them an opportunity to practice that in that practical use case. I don't think you have to practice it as many times once you have established that. And if you can practice it in one area, doing it in one way or with one focus, and then you do it in a different area and a different focus, and you have another focus, and as you change the focuses, that movement becomes, instead of one surface level, hey, it's just this. No, it can be this. It can be option A, it can be option B, option C, and you have this low block that has all this wide variety of different applications or different use cases or different drills that you work on in class, as opposed to, okay, do the low block again. Okay, do the low block again, right? Build that technique into your curriculum, your program, right? Make those connections to be made not just at one level, but make that connection across a variety of different use cases and different situations that low block can be in. And of course, as the students are in your classes and they're going through your motions, give them something to focus on. Maybe you have a focus of the day, maybe you have a focus for a specific drill, but letting them being, of course, the students, letting the students know something to focus on. Give them something to think about while they're going through these motions will help to bring their brain into it. That gives them an opportunity to think about what they're doing. I think we've talked about this before, but you've probably been in a situation where you've driven to work and, oh man, I forgot, I don't remember my trip here. Right? How many cars did you pass? How many stop signs did you get stopped at, or stop lights or whatever? That is what we want to avoid against. You want your students to be mindful when they're in your class. They are there. They showed up. Their brain is in it. They're ready to learn. And as such, as you give them those focuses, so like let's say you're doing a form. All right, listen guys, as we go through this form, your focus this time is your stances. I want to see the best black belt level stances that you can do. All right, ready, go. And then as they go through at specific points or maybe at random intersections, you just say, hey, listen, remember, check those stances. Let me see them. Oh, awesome, nice. All right, let me see this good stance. Right, give them that focus and then kindly remind them of what their focus is as they're going through those movements. Again, that will give them an opportunity to maybe if they are distracted or if they are thinking about something else to be brought back into what their body is doing at that given time. Right? Oh yeah, I do want to practice. I do want to work on this stance. Oh yeah, right. I was supposed to work on my kicks this time. I got to kick higher. My intensity or whatever it is. Give them a focus and then kindly remind them of that. Now, with that, of course, you don't want to give them too many focuses. You don't want to, do this and this. Just one thing, one focus. Right? This drill is going to work on the turn for this back kick. right? Want to make sure your eyes are there. That's going to really help turn your body. All right, let's see it. Remember, look your eyes, turn your body, boom, there it is, right? There you go. Give them focuses. Give them specific things to think about as they're doing these movements, or as they're doing those combinations that they're going through, as they're going through your entire class, however you break down those focuses. But get their minds and their bodies to be thinking and doing and working on the same information. Right? You don't want their brain to be thinking about what they're doing as they get home, or what video game they want to play, or the dishes that still have to be done, or whatever. Get them to think about what they're doing right now. That will help to establish and build and further those connections. Now, we talked a little bit about giving them like a practical application. Maybe as an opportunity in your class, you give them a couple. Okay, listen, this is a practical application for a low block. We talked about that one already. You have them in your position, and you're getting ready to break their arm with this, or whatever your application is. Show them that. Give them the opportunity to go through that. Then say, hey, listen, as homework, I want you to take this move, the high block, and tell me, what is the use case for this? Why are we doing this? What's the purpose behind this move? Give them an opportunity to think about. Maybe you have it as class time instead of homework time. Okay, fine. But give them an opportunity to think about that. How can they use that move that they've done hundreds, thousands, or tens of times, whatever, depending, of course, on the level that they're at. But give them an opportunity to think about that move in a different way. Let them build those connections on themselves. Right? Then, as they're thinking actively about this high block, or whatever the move is, they're going to be building those actionable tools for themselves. That's going to give them ownership over that sequence, or that pattern, or that application of moves that they're doing. Then, of course, that is exactly what we talked about. You've been excited about something before. You've done the research. You put the work in. You watched videos. You read the books. You listen to podcasts, whatever it is, all because you wanted to, not because you had to. So guide your students. Give them a homework assignment, or let them have an opportunity in class to come up with that. Let them actively think about this move that they've done a bunch of times in a different light. How can this move be useful? What's the purpose behind this? Why do we do this? And sometimes they're going to come up with real wild, not very practical or useful things, but they might have fun doing that. And sometimes you might have a student surprise you and come up with a very practical use case for a move that you perhaps haven't thought about previously. But it's all about giving them the opportunity to think about those moves and build those connections for themselves, right? And then as a program that you have, or as a curriculum level or lesson plan level that you have, you say, okay, listen, at this level, I want you to give me a practical use case for low block. At the next belt level, okay, give me a practical use case for a middle block, okay? And then you just continue growing. Or perhaps you give them a guide in the beginning. Hey, these are some practical, easy use cases. Then once they have that foundation, that footwork, then let them grow and build those connections, or make those things on their own. Give them the ownership of those things. Now, of course, with that, as always, you have to go back in, check, and make sure that it's useful, it's practical, it's something that's in line with what you want them to be doing and is useful to your program. Got it, understood. But give them an opportunity to grow in that way. Let them make those connections, build those actionable tools and that information for themselves. Give them that ownership. Well, sir, do you have anything to add to increasing the students' retentions, memory retention, through connections of the moves?
No, sir. I think a good cover of why it's important to do that, to help them remember those things and also improve their techniques as well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. As always, you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, Instagram, whole bunch of places. You can find us at any of those spots at MA Teaching Tactics, MA for Martial Arts. Again, that's MA Teaching Tactics. Until next time, I'm Chris Kent.
And I'm Chris Bean.